We are live, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back. This is the Raw Prospect Podcast. My name is Emmy Nixon. Today is April the 6th, the night before the Masters, the night before the MLB season begins. And today we're going live to preview it all for you. So joining me from Austin, Texas, as always, the stacking himself, Michael Ween. What's up, man?
What is up? I know it is late here in the Central Time Zone, but we need to get this in because this weekend in general is a huge weekend in sports. So I have my water. I have a little bit of caffeine. I'm going to try to keep the energy up because I know we're both a little tired. But I think once we get into this thing and start talking about this exciting weekend in sports that includes opening day tomorrow and the Masters beginning tomorrow, and the opening series and the Masters running all weekend, will be good on our energy. But yeah, if any of y'all are watching this right now, which I highly doubt, but if any of y'all are watching and you have questions that you want us to answer, just put them in the chat. I think there's a chat function on whatever we're recording.
There's a tab for it right here. But yeah,
Okay.
like you said, anything you want us to discuss while we're anything you catch that you may disagree with, go ahead and put it in the chat and we'll answer it for you.
But one thing I do want to do before we get into all that stuff, we haven't done prospect of the week in a while. Do you have an idea of a prospect of the week for this week?
I don't have one prepared, but I can think of one. I'll let you go first, though.
Here's what I'll say. The draft is now, 3 weeks from tomorrow it begins. Tomorrow is April 7th. The draft will begin exactly 21 days from tomorrow, April 28th. And of course, we have a busy time in sports here this April. Next weekend, we start the NBA playoffs. And then 2 weekends after that is the draft. So we haven't really done any draft talk yet on this podcast, although it will start very soon. There is a guy, I've seen him as high as top 5 on draft boards, and I've seen him as low as, later in the first round, like middle to late first round. He's out of Georgia, and he's not the defensive lineman that you think of out of Georgia and Jordan Davis. He's actually the other defensive lineman that some scouts in the league are very high on. His name is Trayvon Walker. He had 3 seasons of football there at Georgia, last year of which was his most productive. You look at the numbers, they're not as glaring as a guy like Jordan Davis, but he was still very productive, and he's a very solid player that projects well into the NFL. He has some versatility. He's very strong, can move around the defensive line. Last year at Georgia, he had 7.5 tackles for loss. I think it was 6.5 or 7 sacks to go along with that. Just a very productive player that has the length, the athleticism, and the size and the strength to project as a very good player in the NFL. And the reason I thought he's interesting is because I've seen him as high up as top 5 in mock drafts and, lower down in the first round. So I think there's a lot of range to where a guy like that could go. But we'll talk more about him later on.
Right. And, as soon as you described that player, I knew exactly who you were talking about. That's how polarizing he's been in terms of where he is on different people's draft boards. And like you said, I've seen him go as low as 26th, and I've seen him go as high as 4th overall. So he's a really polarizing player, and it's just simply because he wasn't in a scheme that really showed off his physical traits. And with the draft combine, he was able to show that off, and now he's on a lot of people's radars. So it's just a question of whether he can show off more of those traits on the football field, and that can show up more consistently on the football field in a
Right.
different scheme that fits him better. So, my prospect of the week is going to be Trae Young. Obviously, he's not an underrated player by any means, but I just wanted to highlight what he did in this past week. Now, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I know this. The Hawks went 4-0 last week, and Trae Young averaged over 30 points per game. And the Hawks, they started the year off super poor. And I remember what he said was early in the year, he had a quote saying how bored he was of the regular season and how he just wants to get to the playoffs. And, that seems to be a common theme among some stars in the NBA. And now that we're getting close to the playoffs, we're seeing him and his team turning it up a little bit. So it's going to be interesting to see whether the Hawks can be competitive coming into this play-in tournament and with playoffs coming around as well.
I think the Hawks have been a very interesting team this year. They're obviously going to be in the play-in in the Eastern Conference. Do you know what seed they are? Are they like what? I know the Hornets are 10. Do you know where they fall and who they're going to play?
The Nets won tonight, so they would be in the 9th spot. The Nets just overtook them.
Okay. So it's going to get interesting, but certainly the winning matters at this time of year, especially when you're fighting for that kind of position. Going 4-0 in like the second to last week of the season to make that push and play your best basketball at the right time, it's very important, and he certainly is the spark plug of that team. But we'll talk more about that next week, and with that, we'll transition into the Masters, which starts in, 8 hours. So let's do it. Let's talk big picture storylines first before we get into like picks and stuff.
Yeah. The big one, obviously, is Tiger Woods is back. Like, are you kidding me? Like, who would have expected this? And, I don't think he would have been bold to even step foot on Augusta National if it wasn't for him playing in the father-son tournament last September. Or was it later than that? It might have been October, November. I don't remember what month it was. But whatever the case was, they ended up finishing second in that tournament. He played well, and they played well as a team. And I think the confidence he had in his body to be able to swing the club at a high level is what led him in the following months to now get to this point to where he's healthy enough to compete at Augusta National, which is just, it's great for golf. It really is.
Yeah. Look, I don't want to be all doom and gloom, but let's be honest. Let's not sugarcoat how surreal this actually is. 14 months ago, February of last year, February 2021, I believe it was the week of the Genesis Invitational. Let's be honest. He got into a single car accident that almost, or could have, cost him his life. And it ended up not, which is great. We're happy he's alive, of course. But there were some people, a lot of people actually, after that crash, that not only wondered whether he would ever play golf again, like even recreationally, but whether he would walk again. And he had multiple surgeries on that leg with compound fractures in his lower right leg, I believe it was. Severe injuries. Now, obviously, we won't really go into the cause of the crash and all that stuff, but it was, his car flipped multiple times and he ended up almost hitting a tree, or I think he did hit a tree, and it could have killed him. So it's just, I guess the overall message, not that we didn't already know this with him coming back from everything that happened and winning the 2019 Masters. But I think this was probably, in terms of injury, pure injury, probably the most serious that we've seen. So if he can overcome this and even compete and contend this week, that would be like, he doesn't even have to win for me to be like amazed that like call this one of the greatest comebacks we've ever seen in sports. And it's crazy because we've already done it with Tiger Woods. So this could be comeback number 2 or comeback number 3, whatever you want to say, because he's had so many obstacles that he's overcome. It's just hard to believe. So the overall message, not that we didn't already know, it's just never doubt Tiger Woods until he's done. Just don't doubt him. That should be the message.
Yeah, and people have doubted him his whole career. People are still going to doubt him, and he's going to continue to prove them wrong. That's what the great players in every sport do. So let's get into this. Let's get into the Masters picks. I'm really excited. This is one of my favorite segments of the entire year as a sports fan. It's one of my favorite events of the entire year. As a golfer, I just think of like seeing that course. It's just a different feeling. The color and also just like what it represents in the game of golf. It's a completely different feeling. And this is the tournament that merits the most prestige if you win it. And this is the players that, if you ask any of these guys, this is the tournament that all these guys want to win the most. So let's get into these picks. So from my understanding, each of us are going to be picking 5 guys each, same type of deal as we did with the Arnold Palmer Invitational, I believe. Well, no, the players. It was the players. Same type of deal. We pick 5 players, combined score at the end of the week. If your player wins the tournament, you automatically win. If your player misses the cut, you get a 5-stroke penalty. And yeah, that will be that. So let's get into this.
Yeah, I'll let you start off.
Okay. My first pick, I think this is every betting man's favorite this week. He's the number 1 player in the world for a reason. He's won 3 times this year. He's been dominant, and it hasn't just been in one phase of the game or one part of his game that's been carrying the others. It's been every facet of the game has been completely on point, and that's Scottie Scheffler. And I just couldn't think of, if like, knowing that I had the first pick, since you had the first pick last tournament, I just couldn't see any reason to leave Scottie Scheffler off of my list this time around. And I think at the very least, he'll contend with where his game is at right now. He's just on fire.
That's a great pick. I think some people probably doubt his ability to win for the 4th time in 6 events, I think it would be. And, he's definitely due to win one of these big, like, Masters major events. And he's been playing great. It's just, that would be like a historical mini run that he's on if he were to win this week. But I don't doubt him at all. He's a University of Texas of Lund. I'm certainly rooting for him. And he's been playing great. So can't go wrong with that pick. I think I'm going to go with, I think we're trying to like space out our picks between like favorites
and then semi-favorites and then going down the list.
Yeah. So I'm going to go with a guy that doesn't necessarily have like the great history at Augusta, hasn't necessarily performed well at Augusta, but I know that if he comes in with the right mindset and he's on with his game, he can win any tournament, that's Justin Thomas, 12-1 favorite. I know he hasn't played well here in the past. He doesn't really putt the ball well at Augusta when you look at the strokes gained putting numbers in his history at the event. But he's got all the things you like in a player that would succeed at Augusta. He's a long driver, pretty good iron player. It's just the putting that if you look at the statistics, he'll need to improve on if he wants to win this event. But I think he's been playing. I think he'll have bones on his bag this week. And
Right.
he obviously has the experience and knows the ins and outs of the course, so maybe he can help. I know Justin Thomas is a really fiery player, so maybe he can help tame like the emotions of a Justin Thomas that will lead him either one way or the other, whether that's good or bad. I like Justin Thomas, even though he hasn't necessarily performed well here in the past. We'll see. And in this format, I don't necessarily need him to win. I just need him to be in contention and post a good score.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a good pick. And, you mentioned the putting. Obviously, the putting will be key. But the thing that I love about Justin Thomas is the fact that he can control his trajectory as well as anyone I've ever seen on tour. Some of the shot making that he's able to pull off. We saw it in the second round at the Players. I don't know if you guys saw that round. Obviously, it's a second round, so maybe not a lot of you saw it. But it was on that Saturday where the wind was just howling out of control, and he was playing all of these weird knockdown shots. He was playing slinging hooks around trees. He was in his bag. So if he's doing that, and he can take advantage of the par fives, which is going to be huge this week. If he can do those two things, then he will 100% have a chance. Whether he wins and loses, it's going to come down to the putter. But if he's on it with his irons, I see no reason for him to be out of contention this week.
All right.
Okay. Now for my second player. Okay. I'm going to go with – yeah, this is tough because I don't think I can take Dustin Johnson because he's obviously one of the higher favorites. But in the match play, I really liked what I saw from him in terms of he was really close to turning that corner in terms of his game. But I will be choosing someone else because you can't choose two top players in the way we're doing our format. So let's see. I'm gonna go Will Zalatoris. Will Zalatoris finished in the top 5 last year. He's coming off a few top 25 finishes this year as well. He's been putting a lot better. We saw that at the match play. He got the putter going, and that's the difference in his game. He's always been a really good iron player, a really straight driver off the tee. He's not the longest guy out there, but really the biggest thing is just putting the ball in play. He puts the ball in the fairway, puts the ball in the green, and then it's just all comes down to the putter with him. And we saw last year he was able to get himself into contention and be steady even with those tough conditions last year. And I think there's a good chance that he'd be able to replicate that. I think he's had a year to learn from what happened Sunday last year. He hung in there close until the end and then kind of fell off near the end of the back nine there. So, I mean, there's not really much rhyme or reason to making these picks. It's just you got to go with your feeling of these players, and I think he's a guy who has good memories at Augusta, and that might be all there is to it.
Okay, so do you know what Will Zalatoris' odds are? Because I want to pick a player within that range for my second pick.
I think
Because it says, let's see.
I think his odds might be closer to like our third pick range, so I think you might not need to worry about that.
Okay.
So you can, yeah.
So I got Justin Thomas, who's 12-1. He's obviously one of the top 5, top 6 favorites to win this week. Let me look at CBS Sports odds. Here we go. Okay, so CBS Sports, we have John Rahm 10-1, Justin Thomas 12-1. You obviously have Scotty Scheffler at 16-1. Cam Smith and Dustin Johnson are up there. You thought about taking Dustin Johnson, but he's obviously too far up there with the favorites. Then we go into like that next group of like Koepka, McIlroy, Schauffele, Cantlay, Spieth, Hovland, Morikawa. I still think that's too high for me to go. So then I'm going to go down to where you picked DeChambeau, 28-1, Zalatoris, who you just picked, 30-1. I think that's a fantastic pick. You have the defending champion, Hideki Matsuyama, 35-1, and then Daniel Berger and Sam Burns, Louis Oosthuizen, all at 40-1. So for my second pick, I think
Yeah, I know. It's tough. There's so many good options on the board, bro.
all right, I'm just going to have to go by feeling because I don't have
And one thing to remember is Augusta tends to be a course that lends itself to a player that can hit a draw or has a draw as their go-to shot. If you look at the past winners, obviously Patrick Reed is one of those guys, as well as all the left-handed guys who hit that little baby fade. Bubba Watson, Phil Mickelson, Mike Weir, they all hit that little fade.
Okay. I'm just going to look something up real fast. I think I'm going to go with Daniel Berger at 40-1 odds. He's a guy that's been talked about a lot this week in reading some of the predictions. He hasn't necessarily played or had all that much success as of late, I don't think. But I do think he's got that type of mindset that you need. And we've seen him perform well in high leverage tournaments before. I don't know. I don't really have any rhyme or reason to it. I just have a feeling that he could be a guy that maybe surprises people this week.
Yeah, I think obviously he's a guy who's contended in majors before, and I think he's due for one. I mean, he's had a lot of close calls in majors and even in just in regular tournaments. I think the last time he won was at the St. Jude Classic in 2019. So it's been a while. So he's definitely due for a win. So with the way he puts the ball, I can definitely see it 100%. So my third pick, I think I'm either going to go with Billy Horschel or Corey Connors, and I think I'm going to go with Corey Connors. So the reason for that is, so Corey Connors is coming in on good form. He finished third at the match play, beating out Dustin Johnson in the consolation match. Played solid all week, got the putter going, which is a huge deal for him. And last week at the what's that tournament called? The Valero. He had a solid finish, finished around 7 under for the week. I think finished in the top 30, top 25 or so. So the point is, he's a guy who hits the draw. Like I said, he fits the criteria. He's a great ball striker. He's one of the best on tour in terms of strokes gained tee to green. Rarely misses fairways. Hits about 14 to 15 greens per round. So he, to me, is a guy who isn't the longest hitter out there, may not be able to reach these par 5s and 2 in some cases, but he's as solid as they come. And I think if he can just have the putter be decent, he'll be right there on Sunday.
I like that pick. I'm going to go with Russell Henley as my third pick. He's a guy that's been playing really well lately. His record at Augusta rides a little bit under the radar, in part because, one, he hasn't been as successful elsewhere enough on tour to earn trips to the Masters year after year. But when he has played in the Masters 5 times total, he has performed well in those chances, making the cut the past 4, and he has 2 top 15 finishes in each of his last 2 appearances at Augusta National. Only 3 of his last 12 rounds at Augusta have been over par, so that means 9 of the past 12 rounds he has played at Augusta have been under par. And, just like Corey Connors, who you mentioned, Henley is a guy that, as I said, is playing well. He has yet to miss a cut this season. He's 11 for 11 in terms of making cuts since this PGA Tour season started, with top 15 finishes in 4 of his last 5 stroke play tournaments. And he leads all players in strokes gained approach over the last 6 months of the PGA Tour. So he's a very good ball striker, iron player, and that's important at Augusta. So I really like the way that he's been playing lately, and I think he's a guy who you could maybe see up there in like the top 20 range in contending.
Russell Henley. Yeah, definitely. I think Russell Henley, he's a very streaky player. He has runs where he'll go on a 5 tournament stretch where he'll finish in the top 5 in every single start. And then he'll go on stretches where he'll miss cuts. So whenever he's on his game, he's one of the guys who's really hard to beat. I really like that pick. He seems to be on form right now. So given his history of being consistent in terms of when he finds his game, he really finds it. He brings it. So in terms of that, I think that's a really solid pick. So my next pick, okay, I had a guy in mind. Where is he? Okay. I'm going to go with Kevin Kisner. 100-1 odds. He's a guy, again, who plays the draw. But the difference is with Kevin Kisner is it's not the putter that we have to worry about. It's the iron play. It's the driver from time to time. It can get a little bit squirrely. But the thing I love about Kevin Kisner is his mindset. He is one of the toughest mentally on tour. And one thing we know about winning at Augusta is that 4 days, it is a grind. And the players have talked about it before. That 4 days of walking Augusta, it is not easy. It's a very hilly course. That's one of the most underrated traits about Augusta National is how treacherous it is in terms of the up and down nature of it. You're going up and down hills the entire course. So that's one thing I really like about Kevin Kisner, and that's one thing that will play into his advantage is how mentally tough he is, and just I think he's just a really steady player. So if the wind starts blowing, if the course firms out, the better that'll play into his hands. The tougher, the better when it comes to Kevin Kisner, because whenever the course is tough, that's when he shows up, because that's when the mentally tough players rise to the top.
Yeah, it seems Kevin Kisner is like always, like every tournament, he's like one of the guys who you could see like he's just a very even-keeled, good, solid golfer. But I like that pick. I was talking to my dad earlier, and he mentioned Kevin Kisner as a guy like a sleeper he liked to maybe contend or possibly win the whole thing. For my fourth pick, let's see. I need to go back to the odds. Let's see here. Okay. So I got Henley, who is 60 to 1. You just took Kisner, who's 100 to 1. I'm going to take someone in that range. Let's see. This is tough. All right, I just gotta pick someone. Let's see. How about Bubba Watson, 80 to 1?
Okay. Yeah, he's been on good form as well. He was starting to find his game at the match play. I that seems to be a common theme. I'm mentioning the match play a lot because since it's in Austin, it's one of the tournaments I pay attention to the most naturally. But you see a lot of these guys, they play well at the match play. It tends to bode well for their form going into Augusta because of how treacherous those greens at Austin Country Club are and how fast they are. It's very similar in the type of greens they face at Augusta National. So that's definitely a good pick. I like that.
Thank you. All right, last pick.
All right. My pick is going to be Thomas Pieters. From Belgium, currently top 50 in the world. He won the Abu Dhabi HSBC Championship this January. He's coming in on good form. He finished tied fourth in 2017 as well. That's his best finish in the major. So he has good history at Augusta as well. And, you know, he's a little different from my other picks in the fact that he's more of a longer hitter. I've chosen a lot of short hitters, steady players, but Thomas Peters, he can get it out there 320, 330 when he really wants to. He can get after it. So I think with how he's been playing recently, the form he's been having going in, and the good feelings from past memories he already has established here, it's going to be a big deal going into this week.
Okay, so you went with Thomas Peters. Is he? What were his odds?
I don't have it in front of me currently. Let me see.
How about for my last pick? $280-1. Sepp Straka. What do you
Okay.
think of that? Real long
I like
shot,
it.
but
I like it. He won the Arnold Palmer Invitational 3 weeks ago. So he's obviously in good form. All right. And it's rare to see first-time winners at Augusta, but he's one of the mainstays on tour this year in terms of if
right.
you've been watching golf, you've seen him on leaderboards consistently. He's been up there. So just in terms of I don't think he'll win per se, but I think in terms of this game where we're doing combined score, I think he'll put up a good score for you.
Right, and I'm not asking him to win, but I've watched him play at periods in the past couple tournaments, and he's been pretty consistent so far this year. So I do like what he brings to the table, and I think he can make a cut and post a decent enough score for me to contribute to my overall team. So to recap, for me, I wrote them down so we don't forget. I have Justin Thomas, Daniel Berger, Russell Henley, Bubba Watson, and Sepp Straka. And then you have, I didn't write down your team. You had Scotty Scheffler, Corey Connors,
Kevin Kisner,
Kevin Kisner,
Will Zalatoris, and Thomas Peters.
Okay. So, yeah, sorry for some of the issues there. Trying to load the odds, and they just wouldn't load. They finally loaded. Trying to find the matchup so we have even teams. But with that, anything else you want to say before we jump into the baseball?
No, but I'm excited, man. I just can't wait to watch tomorrow. I'm gonna be, I'm not proud of it, but I'm gonna be watching during class for sure. I'm just gonna have my phone under the
a lot
desk.
of people will be. I really highly encourage you to watch the Masters. It's one of the great weeks of the year. Top 3, top 4 sports weeks of the year, in my opinion. But with that, let's jump in, and especially with Tiger playing. I mean, he's like the ultimate ratings, needle mover in sports.
Yeah.
But with that, let's move on. Tomorrow is opening day of the 2022 Major League Baseball season. Last episode, we started off our preview by talking about some of the young and exciting players under the age of 25, 26, with all this young talent now in baseball that we were really excited to watch this year. So now we're going to go into the bigger picture. We're going to talk about some of the guys we think can win awards: Cy Young, MVP, Rookie of the Year, and then we'll talk about the teams and who we think will win each division. That's primarily what we're going to do for the MLB preview. So let's start it off. Where do you want to go first? I'll let you pick.
Let's start with the AL.
Okay. We will start with the AL. Let's talk about AL. Let's talk about the AL Central first.
Okay.
So in the AL Central, let me pull up the division. So the AL Central, you're going to have teams like the Minnesota Twins, the Chicago White Sox, I believe the Cleveland Guardians. They're now called the Guardians.
Right.
Who else do you have in that division? Oh,
And
the Detroit Tigers.
Tigers, not Lions.
Yeah.
I almost said Lions.
Yeah, so in the AL Central, you have the Tigers, the Guardians, the Twins, the White Sox, and the Royals. So we'll start with you, Emmy. Who do you foresee being the favorite to win this division?
I think it's the White Sox. You know, they're a young team last year, came on the scene and really played well early in the year, kind of stumbled to the finish line. But I think coming into this year, they have a year in the playoffs under their belt, and they're a year more experienced, a year more mature. And I think they've also built out this pitching staff as well. So with all that depth that they have and also just the lineup, I think they're not going to have any problems manufacturing offense throughout the season. So just assuming health, which is not the most certain thing in the world, assuming health, I think they are 100% the favorite.
I agree with you. On paper, this team, you can make the argument, is the favorite to win the AL pennant this year. Obviously, the AL East is stacked. And in the AL West, you have the Houston Astros, who are perennial contenders, and up-and-coming teams like the Angels and the Mariners. However, this White Sox team on paper, especially their lineup, is just petrifying to opposing pitchers. Tim Anderson, their shortstop, a guy that we didn't talk about last podcast because I don't think he qualified for our age young player exercise, but he's an elite shortstop in today's game. Yoan Moncada, Jose Abreu, Eloy Jimenez, Yasmani Grandal at the catcher position, one of the few catchers that is actually productive from behind the plate. Luis Robert in center field, one of the young and upcoming players that they have in center field that is a player that we didn't talk about last podcast, but he could be in contention for an AL MVP this year. I certainly wouldn't be surprised with all the tools that he has. They trade for A.J. Pollock to go in right field, a hole that they had last year. He can certainly hit some dingers from the Dodgers. Then you have Gavin Sheets at DH plus Josh Harrison, another big bat that they added over from the Washington Nationals. So really 1 through 7, but 1 through 9, this lineup is petrifying, and they're going to score a lot of runs as long as most of these guys, especially in the top 6, are able to stay mostly healthy throughout the season. And then the rotation, Lucas Giolito, Lance Lynn being at the top of the rotation. Lance Lynn is going to start the season on the DL with an injury, but should come back in a couple weeks. Their offense is good enough to survive something like that. But then younger guys behind them, the 3 to 5 in the rotation, is really, really solid. 1 through 5. Dylan Cease, Dallas Keuchel, and then Michael Kopech, who's really a guy that I'm watching out for this year. And then obviously their bullpen is, especially in the back end, is fantastic. So I think the White Sox overall, you can make the argument that they are the favorites to win the pennant in the American League this year, and certainly the favorite to win this division.
Right, 100%. But one thing I will say is one team that had a really interesting offseason was the Twins. Obviously, they had a rough season last year, but they were right back leaning into this window of contention that they see for themselves. They signed Carlos Correa, which was the biggest move of free agency, in my opinion. And they're leaning in here. They're all in. So I think the AL Central will be more of a battle than it was last year. It won't be a runaway by any means, but I do think the White Sox will end up on top.
Yeah, I do think the Twins had a very interesting offseason. They obviously had the biggest name on the market in Carlos Correa, who will plug in immediately at shortstop, produce offensively at an elite level as long as he's healthy, and be a Gold Glove at that shortstop position, which is so important, something that the Twins did not have at all last year. And he's one of the guys in baseball, or really in any sport that he would technically play, but he's a culture changer. He's coming over from that Houston Astros team. He's got that winning mindset that I think the Twins really need. So he'll be one of those guys in the locker room. He'll be, or not the locker room, they use the clubhouse term in baseball. But anywho, he'll be a guy that will be able to take some of these younger guys under his belt and lead in a way that the Twins haven't had that type of alpha male in their clubhouse the past couple of years. But I do like parts and bits of this Twins team. I think Byron Buxton is going to be a key, their young star center fielder who's obviously struggled to stay healthy. If he can stay healthy most of the season, that's a scary 1-2-3 with their young third base prospect, Luis Arraez, Byron Buxton, Carlos Correa, and Jorge Polanco, the second baseman. That's a scary 1-2-3-4. After that, you kind of hit questions. But I do like Miguel Sano, his veteran presence. They obviously trade for Gary Sanchez. They have Max Kepler, right, who's been a productive major league player. So this lineup, you can see how this lineup would come together to produce in a big way. But that's really never been the Twins' major problem. It's really been about the pitching. And when you look at this rotation, Sonny Gray's a guy who could pop off this year at the top of that rotation. And if he can, it'd be huge for them. But then after that, there are a lot of question marks in that rotation. I think that's really the question this year for the Twins is this pitching staff good enough to get them over the hump? Because there are a lot of really good pitching staffs in the AL in general, not including the NL, that you can make the argument top to bottom are better and more proven than this rotation. That's my question with the Twins.
Right. And I definitely think this is one of those teams that will be looking to make moves at the trade deadline. But we'll talk about that when we get there. Is that all it for the AL Central?
Yeah, let's talk about the AL West. I want to save the AL East for last because that's best. So the AL West, this is obviously where the Astros reside. So favorite to win the division. You want to talk about the Astros?
Yeah, I think it would be the Astros. Obviously, the guy we talked about in our last podcast. It comes down to what's his name? Shoot,
Ron Alvarez.
Yordan Alvarez. Sorry. Yeah, I mean, they still have the star power. They may not have Carlos Correa anymore. May not have George Springer anymore, but this team is definitely not lacking in hitting. They definitely still have the talent there, and people forget they just made another year. Obviously, Carlos Correa is a huge hole to fill, but I wouldn't count them out. That's for sure. I think having continued success in Major League Baseball is one of the toughest sports to do it in. And they've been one of those teams that has had I wouldn't say dynasty, but it's been near dynasty-ish success. I'm creating terms here, but you get my point. They've been extremely consistent. They've made deep playoff runs year after year after year, and it's been extremely impressive. I wouldn't bet on it to stop anytime soon.
Yeah, it's certainly impressive when you lose Carlos Correa and you can still have a lineup that top to bottom goes like this. Jose Altuve leading off at second base. Michael Brantley, who's an over 300 hitter for his career in left field, batting second. Alex Bregman, the guy, I feel like fans forget about this guy. He was hurt basically all of last year up until the playoff run. And he's going to come in healthy this season. So, yes, you're losing Correa's production for basically a full season, and you're sort of sacrificing offense at that position, although the guy who's going to fill in, the younger guy, Jeremy Pena, is certainly still a good defensive shortstop and will provide value at that position. But you're also bringing back Alex Bregman for a full season, which you didn't have last year. And when Alex Bregman's at his best, he could be an MVP candidate. So it kind of balances out, in my opinion. But when you have Altuve, Brantley, Bregman, Alvarez in the cleanup spot, and then you have guys like Yuli Gurriel, who's also a close to 300 hitter for the past couple of years. Kyle Tucker, a budding star in right field. Chas McCormick, a guy who came on middle last year when they had some injuries, playing center field. Very good defensive center fielder. Jeremy Pena at the bottom of the lineup. And then Martin Maldonado, while he doesn't really hit very much, he's a catcher. Catchers don't really hit. He's super experienced and plays great defense behind the plate. And is a leader in that locker room. So top to bottom, this Astros lineup is still one of the best in baseball. But the key for the Astros is going to be pitching. And obviously, it happened before the lockout, but they brought back Justin Verlander. He was obviously hurt much of last year with the Tommy John, but they're bringing him back, and I don't expect him to regress at all. He's Justin Verlander. And behind him, you have a rotation that really grew into their roles last year, but will only be pushed down, which makes this rotation even deeper. Framber Valdez, Luis Garcia, Jose Urquidy, Christian Javier, Jake Odorizzi. I mean, this rotation goes 6 deep. The guys that can give you innings and give you production in the rotation. And then today, they were obviously able to re-up and extend their closer, Ryan Presley. So this Astros team, I think there are some questions in that bullpen, but I think the rotation is really strong. Given that Verlander comes back 80% of what he once was, and that this lineup will produce, I think, one of the top rates in the league at producing runs and scoring runs. So, yes, I do think the Astros are still the favorites despite losing one of the best players in baseball this offseason. But I do want to talk about 2 other teams in the AL West because I do think that they got better over the offseason. I do think, and this is my sleeper team in the American League, they currently have the longest playoff drought, in the 4 major American sports. The Seattle Mariners. They were very close to making to ending that streak last year. 190 games. There were some luck involved, but this team got much better over the offseason. They traded for Adam Frazier at second base. They have a lot of young guys. Jesse Winker at DH, one of the best hitters in baseball from the Cincinnati Reds. That was a huge trade. They still have Mitch Haniger, who hit 39 home runs last year. They're bringing up the 3rd-ranked overall prospect in baseball, Julio Rodriguez, who some people say is a combination of Juan Soto and Fernando Tatis. So we'll see how that goes, but this guy is legit. Everybody is raving about him. Jared Kelenic, left field, one of their other young guys. I just love this young core, and they have the veteran presence that you need now with guys like Adam Frazier, a guy who's done it, Jesse Winker, a guy who's done it, Mitch Haniger, a guy who's done it. J.P. Crawford at shortstop, solid defensively. And they add the AL Cy Young winner of last year from the Toronto Blue Jays in Robbie Ray at that top of the rotation. And they have a bunch of young arms with a lot of potential behind them. Talking about guys like Logan Gilbert, Marco Gonzalez, Chris Flexen. I really like this Mariners team. I think they're going to make some noise, and hopefully they can end the longest playoff drought of the 4 major American professional sports. They haven't made the playoffs in 19 years. It is the longest drought, so we're hoping that they can end that. It's going to be a very good team, or at least a very exciting team to watch. And then the other team I wanted to mention was, of course, the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim. Why? Because, well, one, they have 2 of the best players in baseball in Shohei Ohtani and Mike Trout. But also, they added pitching, which is what they needed for so long. It's what they've been missing. It's been the hole in their roster. Behind Ohtani now, as your number 1, you have Noah Syndergaard from the Mets, who's been hurt, yes, but when he's healthy, he's been very good. Michael Lorenzen, a young arm that I really like, Patrick Sandoval, Jose Suarez. They've added guys to this rotation that have legitimate, established Major League Baseball experience, and that hasn't been the case in years past. So I do think that has to matter for something. I do not think they will be a playoff team. I do think the Mariners are better. I do think there are too many teams in the American League for them to maybe get into the playoffs, although it is expanded to 6 teams instead of 5 this year. So their chances do increase a little. But don't be surprised if they are in contention going down to the last month of the season. They're sniffing that wild card position. I do think they have enough in this lineup to produce runs. But we'll see with the pitching. It's certainly gotten better. You can't deny that, but we'll see. We'll see. I'm just interested to watch them this year. I think they could be an above 500 squad, which is an improvement from years past.
Right. Exactly. And the Angels are the team that everyone makes fun of in the MLB. It seems like, even as someone like myself, a casual fan who just checks into baseball every once in a while, they seem to be the punching bag of the MLB community because of the players they have on their roster and their ability to miss the playoffs every single year with those players on the roster. So I'm hoping that with the pitching they've added that they can turn a corner and we can see some playoff baseball from Mike Trout and Shohei Ohtani and all those guys. But I'm going to have to see it to believe it is the bottom line.
All right. Let's move on to the AL East.
Okay.
The AL East. The AL East. We're talking about the Orioles, who are certainly in a rebuild. We're not going to talk about them. Sorry, Baltimore. Not that we'll have any fans from Baltimore, but you never know. But you have 4 legitimate teams that could possibly make the playoffs in this division. And I'd argue that all of them, some of them slightly, some of them to a bigger extent, got better during the offseason with the moves that they made. Obviously, last year, you had 3 teams from this division make the playoffs already. And now there's a possibility of an extra team making the playoffs. So could we see 4 teams from this division make the playoffs? I don't know. Probably not. They're going to beat up on each other a lot. That's certainly going to be the case because, you play 18, 19 games against each team from your division. So it's going to be a lot of beating up and cannibalizing in this division. But there's certainly all the talent in the argument. But I want to know, who do you think will win this division? It's tough.
Man, I'm not going to lie. I want to say the Blue Jays, but
That's a
I mean,
popular pick.
it's almost like how can you not after seeing what they're doing in the preseason and like how that team looks, that lineup, just wow. Like I didn't do much prep for this episode, I admit, but what little prep I did, the Blue Jays popped off the page. I'll tell you what. I mean, the moves that they made. I mean, bringing in former Cy Young winners. I mean, are you kidding me? Like, it almost feels like, when a team gets a young quarterback, they want to build as much talent in a free agency as possible in one season to get that rookie quarterback, a contending team on that rookie deal. It almost feels like that. They want to get Vladdy Jr., that contending team, as quick as possible. And I think they've done it, man. I think as it stands right now, my power ranking for the AL East would go Toronto, Tampa Bay, the Yankees, and then Boston. But I'd be interested to hear.
Are you there?
No.
Oh, there you are.
Okay. All right. The internet's
All
back.
right.
Okay. Like what I was saying was my power ranking for the AL East as it stands right now would be Toronto, Tampa Bay, the Yankees, and then Boston. But I was just thinking, like, as a Yankees fan, you probably feel some type of way about that. I'm interested to hear your take on that.
Well, not necessarily. Yankees fans, there isn't really a reality with Yankees fans. They expect to go out and pay $300 million for this player, $200 million for that player. Like, let's go get Carlos Correa. Let's also go get Max Scherzer. Like, that's just, and even as a big market team, that's not how it works these days in baseball. You have what's called the soft cap with, unless you're the Dodgers, of course, but the Dodgers are the exception to the rule. Basically, the Yankees don't have George Steinbrenner anymore. Like, that's not, he's gone. It's now Hal Steinbrenner. And Hal manages different, or, owns this team differently in a different manner than George does. But obviously, you're the New York Yankees. You haven't made a World Series in 13 years. Like, the pressure is building to get back there as the New York Yankees. So fans expected this offseason, with obviously the hole at shortstop, to go out and get one of these big names, whether it would be Corey Seager, or whether it be Carlos Correa, or even a Trevor Story, who ended up going to the division rival Red Sox, which was pretty disappointing. But basically the point was, it's a skewed reality with Yankees fans. I personally am not like one of those fans who expect, like, because I don't understand. Like, I've seen the highlights and I know what happened in the past. Like, I know the teams of the late 90s and that they were able to win like 4 World Series in 5 years, and they were going out to get. And I know what happened in 2009 when they went out and brought in Mark Teixeira and CC Sabathia and paid big money to go out and basically buy a ring. Like, I know the history, but I was too young to really understand. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, what those times were like.
Yeah.
I'm more of a newer generation Yankees fan. Like, I started watching this team when they were rebuilding back in like 2015. They were in that transitional phase. And then guys like Gary Sanchez and Aaron Judge and All these players that you see now on this current team, this core of players, like the baby bombers as they call them, they've grown together the past like 5-6 years. And so I'm more of the newer generation Yankees fan. So, but with that was sort of my rant there. I do
Yeah,
agree.
and I mean, I would say the same thing about the Cowboys, which is interesting. But yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
And it's different for me with like the Steelers. I've been watching them since basically forever. But anyways, we're talking about baseball. The Blue Jays, with what they did this offseason, they deserve to be the favorite to win this division. They do. First of all, they have a bunch of advantages working in their favor. Number one, last year with the COVID still going on and like all the vaccination stuff still going on, getting figured out, they were moving for basically half the year. They had to play their games down in Florida at the spring training site down in Dunedin. They weren't playing in a real major league ballpark for over half the season last year. They were moving all around. They played like some of their season in Dunedin. And then like after the All-Star break, they moved up to play in Buffalo. And then finally at the very end of the year, they got to play in Toronto. But now they're going to get to play in Toronto with those fans. And I can tell you this, when that, I forget, I think it's the Rogers Center, when it gets loud, just like Raptors, we've seen Raptors playoff games in the past and all this stuff, those fans get really riled up, especially when a team like this is projected to maybe even contend for an AL pennant. Man, it's going to be, they're certainly going to have a home field advantage because unvaccinated players will not be allowed to play when they travel across the border to go play the Blue Jays. So it's not clear what the status of a bunch of these stars in the AL East are, but when those road games come and they got to travel across the border, some of these teams could be missing marquee players. Like this is an underrated advantage that the Blue Jays are going to have this season. One, getting to play the entire season in the city where they reside. And number two, that vaccination, crossing the border stuff will obviously maybe help them too. But the roster in general, this lineup is just like it strikes fear into the heart of pitchers. George Springer leading off, who was hurt for much of last year, but is still a very good leadoff hitter. Bo Bichette, their young shortstop. Vladimir Guerrero Jr., who could very well win the AL MVP. Teoscar Hernandez, great leadoff hitter. Cleanup hitter. They add Matt Chapman, a great Gold Glove first baseman from the Oakland A's. Ludwig Gurriel, the brother of Yuli Gurriel in left field. Alejandro Kirk at DH. He's got some pop to him. Kevin Biggio, the young second baseman, and then Danny Jansen, another catcher that doesn't hit but is very good defensively. So top to bottom, like 1 through 8, fantastic lineup. It like rivals the White Sox lineup when you look at the depth of it and just the players that can produce in this lineup. But the rotation is really, really improved. Jose Barrios is the guy that they traded for from the Twins last year. When he's on, he can be a number one type guy. Also, Kevin Gausman. He was like the ace of the Giants last year. They had him to come in. He's a possible sleeper AL Cy Young candidate. Jin Ryu, a guy that's been here a couple of years. He's as a number one last year, he wasn't, or like number one-ish type. He wasn't great, but as a number 3, he's fantastic. Their younger guy, Alek Manoah, and then UC Kikuchi. Kikuchi. I said his name wrong. He's a fantastic number 5 from the Mariners. So, and then their bullpen, I don't know much about it, I'll admit, but I assume it's decent. So yes, I do think with what they did in the offseason, they added balance to their lineup, production to their lineup, and they added 2 solid pitchers to this rotation to deepen it. I do think they deserve to be that top spot. Now, this is where it gets interesting. You have the Rays, who have just been doubted year after year, and they keep pumping out somehow. high 90s, 100-win seasons year after year, and they keep winning this division somehow, some way, with not star-studded names up and down this roster. But I do think it comes down to the Rays and the Yankees for the second spot in the division. And given what I know about this division, what's happened the past couple of years, the Rays have figured out how to be a thorn in the Yankees side with this pitching staff that they have. They just know how to pitch to different teams. They're one of the most well-run organizations in baseball with this low payroll. I don't know how they do it, but whatever the recipe is, it works. A guy like Shane McClanahan is a guy at the top of the rotation that's expected to break out this year. They have a lot of guys that throw 100 plus, and if you can't hit it, well, you're in trouble. And their bullpen's absolutely fantastic. And we know how they manipulate, like how Kevin Cash, their manager, is able to manipulate matchups with this pitching staff. And then in their lineup, these aren't well-known household names, but these are guys that produce for them. And in Lau, I think Wander Franco will eventually be that guy. They just paid him a lot of money at the age of 20, so they better hope he is. But everything we've seen so far suggests that he will be that guy. And then the guy right behind him, Randy Arozarena, who just 2 years ago in the World Series against the Dodgers was like the best player, arguably, even though the Rays lost that series. Yandy Diaz, Ji-Man Choi, Josh Lau, Mike Zunino, Kevin Kiermaier, Manuel Margot. They're really good defensively. They lights out pitching, and they do enough offensively to win games. So and they beat up on the Yankees the past couple of years. So unless that changes this season, which it very well could, who knows? But I don't know why my voice sounded like that.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
But yeah, I give the edge to the Rays, but barely. I do think the Yankees come in third, but obviously that's my one bias as a Yankees fan. I'm never going to pick Red Sox to finish ahead of the Yankees. But finishing third in this division could still very well be a playoff caliber team. It was an interesting offseason. They bring back Rizzo at first base, Aaron Judge, Joey Gallo, who they got at the trade deadline last year, Giancarlo Stanton. I do like that they traded for Josh Donaldson at third base. He has an AL MVP in his bag. He's a little bit older, but I do think he provides better defense at the hot corner than Gio Urshela did. Gleyber Torres, Aaron Hicks in center, Kyle Higashioka catching, and then Kiner Falefa, a guy that they got from the Twins in return for Gio Urshela and Gary Sanchez. Very solid offense or defensive shortstop to basically stop that position until they can bring up one of these prospects that they're really high on. So the lineup is good. They did sacrifice offense at the shortstop and catcher positions, which I do worry about a little bit. But I'm hoping for bounce back seasons from guys like DJ LeMahieu, who's been a staple. I think Anthony Rizzo having a full season in this lineup will help as well. Stanton playing more of the outfield, those I guess they're calling them the three towers in the outfield with Aaron Judge, Joey Gallo, and Giancarlo Stanton. I mean, that's just a monster outfield. I think Joey Gallo is the shortest guy in that outfield, and he's 6'6". So there you go. Never seen anything like it. The pitching obviously relies a lot upon Garrett Cole. A lot is placed on his shoulders. There are some question marks behind Garrett Cole, but I don't worry about Cole at all. I still think he'll be top 3 AL Cy Young candidate when it comes down to it. I mean, last year was his worst year since he got traded over from Pittsburgh. In the 4 years he's been, or 5 years he's been since getting out of Pittsburgh and going to the Astros and breaking onto the scene as like an ace type guy along with Verlander, and then coming to the Yankees. 2017, 2021. Last year he had a 3.23 ERA, which is like fantastic. But everyone was killing him because of the sticky stuff and all this stuff. And it was his worst year since the Pirates. A 3.2 ERA, his worst year. I don't know. I just think he'll be fine. But the big question here is Luis Severino. Can he stay healthy the full season? Because he hasn't the past couple of years. He came back late last year, looked really good, looked like vintage Sevy coming out of the bullpen, but now he's going to be extended back into a rotation role, and he's expected to be the solid number 2 behind Cole. That's really the big question with this Yankees team is who's the solid number 2 starter, like consistent number 2 starter behind Cole, because they haven't had that the past couple of years. But their bullpen is probably the best in this division, or arguably the best in the American League. Well, I'd say behind like the Rays and the White Sox, they're up there. You can make arguments, but as long as Chapman is decent, this bullpen is lights out, and it was lights out late last year. So, yeah, there are some things, there are questions, but I do think they got better defensively, and I think they'll be able to do enough to be like in that 91, 92 win range, just like they were last year, and be in that wild card-ish contention. And then the Red Sox, they have a great lineup as well, just like pretty much every team in this division. They added Trevor Story, which is fantastic for them. The question is the pitching. Chris Sale is obviously going to be out again with injury for a couple weeks. Eovaldi is a guy who's come on. He pitched a wild card game last year, did a fantastic job. Could end up being their number 1. He's fantastic. Pitches well against the Yankees, which is interesting because on Friday you're going to have Cole pitching against Eovaldi in the opener. Pivetta, a younger guy. Tanner Houck, a younger guy. Michael Walker, a guy who they brought over from the Rays. And Rich Hill, a guy that they brought over from the Mets. So there are question marks behind Eovaldi and whether or not Chris Sale can stay healthy. And the bullpen's shaky, but certainly they could, just like last year, surprise everyone and end up winning this division because they're the Red Sox.
Yeah, 100%. And they have a ton of firepower is the thing. And in the regular season, you can get away with a lot just from scoring a ton of runs consistently, and pitching is when pitching is most needed in the playoffs. And, that really showed itself last year in that wild card game against the Yankees. But overall, like throughout the season, the Red Sox won a lot of games because they were just able to outscore people.
Right. Yeah, that's why I'm so excited for this baseball season. There are like 3 divisions that I'm really excited to have teams that I'm really excited to watch. The AL East is one of them. And then 2 others are in the NL. So let's move on to the NL. Look, it's getting late.
Yeah,
so I don't want to
thinking
go into all the awards, but we have a lot of time. Baseball season is a slug. I mean, we can still go into like all the award stuff and all that at a later time.
Let's just run through this NL stuff fast, and then we can call it a night.
That's what I was thinking as well. Okay.
All right.
Let's start in the NL East. You have the defending national champions, World Series champions in the NL East, the Atlanta Braves. It's sort of funny because you saw the NCAA president at the trophy ceremony Monday night say Kansas City Jayhawks instead of Kansas Jayhawks. I thought that was funny. But anyways, you have the defending World Series champions, the Atlanta Braves. Who, yes, they lost Freddie Freeman, but they replaced him with an all-star caliber first baseman in Matt Olson. Then you have the New York Mets, who did a lot this offseason to improve their squad after a disappointing year last year that had a lot of hype. They're going to have the same this year. And then you have the Philadelphia Phillies. Those are really the three top teams in the division, in my opinion, and in that order. I think it'll be Braves, I think it'll be Mets, and then I think it'll be Phillies. And I do think the Phillies could contend for like the last wild card spot in the NL East, considering some of the moves they made. But let me just run through my rundown real fast. In terms of the Braves, you basically had the same team minus Freddie Freeman from last year. A lot of the guys that they brought over at the trade deadline last year and produced well for them are still on this team. Guys like Eddie Rosario in left field. Who else? Adam Duvall in center. Travis d'Arnaud at catcher. But also, you still have the heart and soul of this team, and you're bringing back Acuna from his ACL injury last year. He was one of the top 5 players in baseball, in my opinion. And you replace Freddie Freeman with a really good left-handed bat to sort of balance out this lineup at first base in Matt Olson. It's not often that you lose an elite player at one position and you replace them with another elite player at that position. So I think the Braves did a great job in spite of losing Freddie Freeman. They still have a great lineup, guys that produce up and down. And in terms of the rotation, Max Fried, one of the great young pitchers in baseball, is coming off injury. He was out all last year, so they did really well to get by without him for most of the year. But Max Fried, Charlie Morton, a guy who has experience and is the veteran, Ion Anderson, and you can keep on going. And then they add the Dodgers closer, Kenley Jansen, which will only improve this bullpen. I still think they're the best team in the NL East until proven otherwise. And they're the defending champions, so I can't knock them for that. Second, I had the Mets. They did a lot this offseason. Jacob deGrom is shut down with some shoulder soreness. They just want to be sure that he's okay for the first 2-3 weeks of the season, but they'll be fine without him because guess who they added? They added Max Scherzer. And when this rotation gets healthy, that's the best 1-2 punch in baseball, and I don't care what anyone says. Jacob deGrom and Max Scherzer. And they also had like an elite number 3 in Chris Bassett from the Oakland A's, who were sellers this offseason. And behind Chris Bassett, who could be a sleeper AL Cy Young candidate or NL Cy Young candidate. They could have 3 NL Cy Young candidates. I mean, it probably won't happen, but it's possible. This rotation could have 3 NL Cy Young candidates just in this rotation. If that 1-2-3 plays out like expected, but then you have Taijuan Walker, Carlos Carrasco behind them. So rotation, fantastic. Lineup, they added Starling Marte, who's a star center fielder. They also added Mark Canha, who's really good in left, can play. He's a versatile outfielder to go along with guys like Pete Alonso, Lindor at shortstop, and others. Robinson Cano, Jeff McNeil. It's great. The question's the bullpen and health. Bullpen and health. That's what it is with the Mets. But I do think they'll be a lot better than last year. They'll be competing for a playoff spot. And then I talked about the Phillies a little bit. I do think what they did this offseason is, I guess, commendable would be the right word. Adding Kyle Schwarber in left field. His defense is subpar, but he can hit a lot of home runs and produce. You could put him at DH if you want. One of the best catchers in baseball from an offensive perspective, JT Realmuto. He'll just need to stay healthy. Bryce Harper had a fantastic spring training. They add Nick Castellanos from the Reds, who's a great hitter. Rhys Hoskins, Didi Gregorius, Gene Segura. It just goes up and down. The question is health in this rotation. Can Aaron Nola stay healthy? Can Zach Wheeler stay healthy at the top of that rotation? But they did improve their bullpen as well. So that's the NL East for me. The Nationals and the Marlins, they'll be okay. There'll be points and times this season where you look up and you're like, wow, the Marlins are on a 7-game winning streak. And it won't surprise me because they do have some talent. They did add Jorge Soler from the Braves World Series winning team. He's the guy who hit that monster home run at Minute Maid in the World Series last year. They have some young pitchers that I like, but they're obviously not expected to be contenders for the playoffs. And same thing with the Nationals. Yeah, you want to watch Juan Soto, but other than that, it's going to be tough.
Right, and I really don't have much to add. You've really covered everything. So for the sake of time, let's just keep it moving. NL Central next.
Yeah, for me, it's the Brewers and then everyone else. But I want to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, pretty simple. Yeah, I think the Cubs have a good chance to finish above 500, but even then, I don't know if they'll have enough to make it to the wild card. But I really don't see any of these teams competing in terms of winning the division. So I really do think the Twins are going to run away with it again.
You mean the Brewers?
Yeah, the Brewers.
Yeah, I know. Like a lot of these Central teams can get confusing.
Yeah.
But listen, 2 months into the season, you'll know all this stuff. Yeah, the Brewers, I think, are the clear favorites to win this division. Why? Because of the rotation. Woodruff, Corbin Burns, Freddie Peralta, another great 1-2-3 punch in that rotation. I don't know all this off the top of my head. I'm obviously looking at an article that has all the projected lineups and all the projected rotations. I'm not reciting these names off the top of my head, just in case you guys are wondering.
It was a little scary, to be honest. I was like, how does he know all this stuff?
No, I don't know every single one of these names off the top of my head. But this lineup got better. They added Hunter Renfroe. I think they added Andrew McCutchen, who's a solid veteran. I think they added Jock Peterson as well. They had some pop to this lineup. And it's solid defensively with Adames from the Rays at shortstop, Colton Wong at second base from the division rival St. Louis Cardinals. Look, the rotation is shut down, lights out, and the lineup will produce. They have veterans up and down that lineup, and we're obviously all waiting for that bounce back year, Christian Yelich, to return to that all-star caliber form. And if he does that, they could win the World Series. Like, I'm not even kidding. They could add to the banners of recent past in Milwaukee, with, of course, the Bucks winning it last year. And I think that would be pretty cool for the city of Milwaukee.
Right.
Like, I know they love Giannis and basketball, but this Brewers team, trust me, they love baseball too. So,
and it would make up for the pain that they're going through with the Packers also.
Exactly. Like this, it could go Bucks 1, Brewers 2, Packers 3. Like that could be the hierarchy in the Wisconsin area of professional sports teams.
No, I definitely won't. The Packers will still always be the top, but you never know. It could change fast, depending on how this year goes. But that's a whole conversation for another day. Sorry, I didn't mean to open that can of worms.
Do you have any? I'm just talking about this year.
Yeah,
but,
yeah.
Anyway,
I think the Brewers will be fantastic this year, definitely.
Do you have any other thoughts, or let's just move to the NL West?
No, not really. I think this division is pretty simple.
Okay, NL West, you go first. It's obviously Dodgers, Padres, Giants. Those are the three teams.
Yeah, and I don't have my notes in front of me because my phone just died. But yes, the Dodgers, as they always are, they're always going to be contenders. It seems like, just with how much money they're willing to spend in free agency year after year after year. Just the star power that they have in their lineup. Also, I mean, up and down that lineup, you just have star player after star player.
Right.
And I could easily see the Dodgers having the best record in the MLB this year. They didn't win the division last year. The Giants actually won it, but I definitely see the Dodgers taking that step back up and stepping in front of the Giants, especially since they were able to show off their dominance in that 7-game series head-to-head with the Giants as well.
Yeah. I mean, the Dodgers, they already had Mookie Betts. They already had Trey Turner. They already had Cody Bellinger. They already had, Max Muncy, Justin Turner, Chris Taylor, Gavin Lux, Will Smith. And then they just add Freddie Freeman.
Will Smith, that's a slapper.
No, he's a young catcher who's on the rise. He's in the middle of this lineup, and it's like he's sandwiched by a bunch of star Betts, Freeman, Trey Turner, Max Muncy. I'm not sure you can find a better 1, 2, 3, 4 in terms of lineup in baseball. And they could substitute, Chris Taylor, Cody Bellinger. They could put these other guys there at the bottom of their lineup, at the top of their lineup. They just have a lot of depth. Yes, they lose Max Scherzer, who came over at the trade deadline last year. He's basically a rental, but they still have Clayton Kershaw and Walker Buehler. So, and they get Craig Kimbrell from the White Sox just a couple days ago to replace Kenley Jansen as their closer. So, Dodgers obviously World Series favorites. But the question is, we obviously saw the Giants have a really good year last year. We didn't really expect it, but now they have this really good team. And then you have the Padres who have a lot of talent but are looking to bounce back, sort of in the way that the Mets are. Had a lot of hype going into last year, but didn't really pan out as they wanted to. They finished below 500, did not make the playoffs. There was some friction, I know, in that clubhouse. And then the Giants, a more veteran team, they just cruised to 106 wins last year somehow. So what do you think? Who do you think finishes second in the are you a big Padres guy, or do you like the consistency of the Giants?
I'll lean towards the consistency of the Giants, but I think it will be a battle. I don't think it's going to be one way or the other, convincingly. I think it'll be close to the finish, which is what we like to see, obviously. And it's interesting to see the difference in styles. I mean, you mentioned it. I mean, the Padres, they're explosive. They pack a punch. They can, when they're on their game and they're playing you, they can put up runs in a hurry, and you're just going to have to keep up. And the Giants are just almost methodical. They don't hit that many home runs, it seems like. They're just runs batted in over and over and over again.
Right.
So we'll see how it all plays out. But I do give the slight edge to the Giants in the preseason just because we gave the Padres the benefit of the doubt last year, and I just want to see it this time.
Yeah, I do too, especially with Tatis being out first couple weeks with that wrist injury or elbow injury. I forget what it is. They still have a very good lineup, don't get me wrong, but I do think you're going to see them maybe start slow and then really take off middle of the season. They could be one of those. Obviously, they love to be active at the trade deadline. You still have guys like Manny Machado. They add Luke Voigt, who's a really good. He'll produce for them, and a DH role now. We all forget they added the DH in the National League. Finally, we don't have to see pitchers hit anymore, except for Shohei Ohtani. And then other guys like. I'm not going to say them all because you probably don't know who they are, and it's probably useless to you. But yeah, Manny Machado, Luke Voigt, Eric Hosmer, Will Myers. I just said them all anyways. And then in that rotation, you have it's late. You have Yu Darvish, Joe Musgrove, Blake Snell. They add Sean Manaea from the A's, and then we won't go any further than that. Later in the season, we will, but right now at 12:41 a.m. on April 7th, I guess it is now. When we started the podcast, it was April 6th. That just shows how late it is.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do agree with you. I like the Giants' consistency a little more, but I do think the Padres could be in contention for a wild card berth. But yeah, just real quick in terms of the Giants, this rotation is really what you look at. They add Carlos Rodon, who's like really good at the White Sox last year, and then all the rest of their veteran pitchers. Logan Webb being the household name, who came on. He's a really young guy and was fantastic for them in the playoffs last year. So that's the Giants. Great manager as well. So yeah, I think really to wrap this up before we sign off, in the AL, I would go, and it's 6 teams this year, right? 3 division winners, 3 wild card teams. In the AL for the playoffs for my preseason somewhat prediction, AL East, I'd go Blue Jays. AL West, I'd go Astros. AL Central, I would go White Sox. For the wild card teams, I would go Rays, Yankees, and I do think that the Mariners are going to break their 19-year drought. So like the improvements that they made to what was a 90-win team last year. Those are my playoff teams in the American League. In the National League, I go Dodgers, Braves, Brewers, Mets, Giants, and then maybe either the Padres or the Phillies. I don't know which one. But for now, I'll go Padres. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for this live stream, guys. Leave a like if you're willing. Actually, no, just leave a like. We're doing this pretty late at night, like we've said over and over, and we do a lot to get this content out to y'all. So we'd really appreciate it if you leave that like and subscribe to our channel. And I'll leave it to you, Michael, to sign off because I can't think straight anymore.
Yeah, thank you once again for bearing with us. We're gonna try to get on schedule. It's been a busy time in school and like all the other aspects of life, and it's such a busy time in sports that we've been just trying to scramble to coordinate our schedules and find time to do this. But we had to do it because I think this arguably is one of the biggest weeks in sports. We had the 2 national championship games on Monday, and Sunday and Monday. Sunday was the women's, Monday was the men's, and then now we have the Masters and baseball opening day, and we have the end of the NBA regular season as well. So we had to do this. We'll be back soon, talking draft, talking NBA playoffs, and other stuff as well.
NBA MVPs, the awards as well.
Be on the lookout for all that stuff. But until then, I guess just like Tiger
just like our sleep schedule.
Yeah. Just like our sleep schedule and the chances of me not sitting in front of the TV for the rest of the weekend with the Masters and MLB opening day and MLB opening weekend and NBA.
And F1 race this weekend at midnight Saturday.
Exactly. Just like the chances of me not sitting in front of the TV this weekend, we are going. Peace out, y'all.
Peace. All right, how do I end this shit? We're using a new thing. I don't know how to end it. Okay, there it is. Okay.